That's a tragedy. Because when I was in medicine, it wasn't like that. We were encouraged to ask questions and to be different. And now it's clear you can't. You've just got to toe the party line. And if you don't toe the party line, you're out. And that's the end of medicine, unfortunately. Yeah. And what I know is that the social media is driving the future of medicine. And the future of medicine is that the patient will control who treats him or her and what information they're interested in. It's not going to be from one doctor. Yeah. So one of my great friends is Sami Inkinen, who's started a company called Verta Health. And they've got a fabulous study going at the moment where they've got 200 diabetics. They're following and they've got them out to 1 year. At 1 year, 97% have stopped taking insulin. 97%.
That's a lot.
Yeah. They haven't reported exactly what the reversal rates are, but they're going to be high. But the point is they don't need insulin. And insulin is the expensive drug. And insulin is the growth industry in medicine. If you want to invest in something you're going to make money of, it's insulin. So this study could put 6 pharmaceutical companies out of business.
Novo Nordisk in Denmark is one of the biggest companies in Denmark.
Yeah. And do you know that company started because Banting didn't want to make any money out of insulin, and he gave the whatever the contract to the Danes, and now it's one of these. He's turning in his grave. But anyway, that's potentially over, because now we know that if you eat a low carbohydrate diet and you have diabetes, you do not need to use insulin. In fact, using insulin is damaging your health. So
maybe you want to say that again, because that's something that's very profound.
Yeah, we know in all the studies that the people who are on insulin do worse than those who are on metformin, for example. So adding insulin to control your diabetes, which you have to do. I would be on insulin if I was not on a low carbohydrate diet, because I'm 7 years into this and probably 10 or 15 years into diabetes, because all this period I wasn't diagnosed. I'd be on insulin and my control would be terrible. Instead, it's very good. And I'm just using metformin, because the more insulin you inject, the more insulin resistant you become, and you need more and more insulin. And so you die from the insulin. The more insulin you use, the quicker you die. And we now know insulin is carcinogenic. It activates hormones, pathways that produce cancers, dementia, arterial disease. Diabetes is a disseminated arterial disease. And that's the other paradox, that we're told that heart disease is disappearing. It's not. It's just been converted into arterial disease. And that's hidden. So the cardiologists say, see what we did, heart disease going away. It's not. The acute heart attacks may be dropping, but the population with heart disease is growing continuously. And instead, we've got diabetes. And diabetes is the biggest cause of heart attacks. So the growth of diabetes is going to mean there's going to be a swamping of heart disease in the future.
And how do you see the health and wellness industry progressing? Do you see the pharmaceutical companies having less influence or more influence?
Well, the problem is the pharmaceutical model of disease doesn't work. And we know that. I mean, I've just read a paper where they looked at the 10 highest grossing drugs sold today. And the number needed to treat, that means the number of benefit. In the best case is 1 in 3. So these are expensive drugs. These are the most expensive drugs. 1 in 3 benefit. That means 2 of the 3 people you give the drug to don't benefit. But the average is like 1 in 9 or 1 in 10. So the drugs don't work. I mean, if you're only going to get 1 in 10 benefiting, the drug doesn't work. So we might as well try something else, and because it's nutritional. And so my conclusion is that 85% of chronic disease today is nutritional. And if you don't sort out the nutrition, you can do all these other medications. So what the studies like the Verta Health study are showing, that we're taking people off the medication and they're getting better. And we have a study published in the South African Medical Journal coming from Canada. It was a group of young South African doctors working in Canada, showing that we reversed the metabolic syndrome from 60% to 20% in this group of patients, 150 of them. In fact, there was a bigger population, but we selected the 150 where they had the best data. We went from 60% metabolic syndrome to 20%. Why? Just putting them on a high-fat diet, that's all. Medications dropped and they improved. So metabolic syndrome is also completely reversible. And it costs nothing. Just change your diet.
And when we're talking about high fat, it's avocados and nuts and
coconuts.
Coconut oil.
That's correct. And pork and lamb, those are the big fat
And
ones.
the organ meats.
Yeah, and dairy. Dairy is also high in fat. That's right.
And what about the microbiome? There's
Yeah.
more and more information coming out
Yeah.
about that. Where do you see that playing its role?
Well, it's so funny because yesterday a paper was published in Biz News, and it's a professor of genetics at one of the leading London universities, and I haven't checked which it was, and it says, this proves that Tim Noaks' Banting diet works. So I said, hold it, what's going on here? This guy is a professor of genetics. He goes to live with the Hadza community in Tanzania, where they still hunter-gatherers, and he eats well like they eat, and he measures his microbiome before he leaves, and then he collects all his stools while he's there, and within 3 days there was a dramatic change in his microbiome towards a healthy one. He said, there you go. If you eat these non-processed foods, you eat as the Hadza eat, you improve your microbiome. And there are other studies showing, also in the last week or two, showing that people who improved their multiple sclerosis changed their microbiome by eating this diet, or variants of the diet, but getting rid of the processed foods. So a lot of people were trying to tell us that if you eat a carnivorous diet, you damage your microbiome. No, you improve it, and these are the studies coming out.
Cutting out wheat and sugar.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the biggest.
But
it's not rocket science.
No, exactly. But that's the reality.
Yeah.
And
something that's so simple.
And I tell people, I said, do you want to win a Nobel Prize? You just need to know 3 facts. Wheat causes leaky gut.
Yeah.
When you get leaky gut, you get autoimmune disease. In autoimmune disease, you produce antibodies to proteins inside the body. Well, why don't you go and look at those protein sequences that you produced antibodies to, and see if you can find anywhere in the gut that are the same protein sequences. Oh yes, these bacteria here, they have the same sequence as that. So I said, well, maybe those bacteria are getting into the bloodstream. It doesn't make sense. What's our explanation, at the moment? No, the body starts cannibalizing itself, producing antibodies, autoimmune disease. But we didn't have autoimmune disease before we had wheat. And wheat, that opens up the gut. It doesn't take a genius. I mean, I've just told you. That's all it does. If I was in gastroenterology, I would be doing autoimmune disease, and that's what I'd be looking for.
Yeah. And people are eating bread which is loaded with wheat, pasta which is loaded with wheat, and it put in so many of the packaged denatured foods that have got little or no life force in them.
Exactly, and then the wheat comes along with glyphosate, and people don't know that. Those cornflakes that you're eating in the breakfast have got glyphosate, which
is a pesticide.
Exactly, and it kills off the microbiome, and it does all sorts of other things, and it's now considered carcinogenic.